for some more kitchen table, astronomy, film critique, and politics with our resident astronomer, Hampshire College astronomer, Dr. Salman Hameed, Mr. Universe, member of the Amherst Cinema Board. And it has been a very hard few weeks for people who love other human beings with what's been going on in Gaza. And this is something that you wanted to talk about today. Why, Mr. Universe?
Well, as a human being, I want to talk about this because it is about humans as well. And I mean, there are multiple reasons why I wanted to talk about it, and it's a little weird, at least for 1 week, to talk about space and sort of and completely be detached from what is happening in the Middle East. In fact, I mean, it can be an escape, but sometimes you do have to face what is happening. So the blue dot, pale blue dot that Sagan's aspect was or blue marble earth and stuff like that, well, all of these things, if you look in a cosmic perspective, I mean, it's bizarre that humans do what humans have been doing. And you don't see boundaries, we live for such a short period of time. Humans been around for a few 100,000 years. If you add early humans, you can add a few million years on a time frame of 4.5 billion years of the planet. We are most likely not going to be here for very long, so we are just a blip, and yet we come in and we do atrocities, we kill people, we do all of these things. So there is that element to it, which in some ways we can talk about, and we just did, and move on. As you know, I also have a channel, YouTube channel, both for this stuff also, but also for South Asia. And I just got a comment just this morning, which said, it was in Urdu, but the person said that I'm so glad that at least for 15 to 20 minutes, so my videos are that long once a week that comes out, I can leave behind this of what pain and suffering that we are seeing on Earth and think about something else. And normally I would have taken that, I was like, yeah, thank you very much, But frankly, sometimes you do have to face the pain and suffering and talk about it. And I'm not 100% sure how I felt about that comment, because I was like, well, I don't want that be a distraction, because real people are dying.
Right.
And that, just having a distraction off the cosmic perspective, which usually it's great for humility, great for sort of shooting down self-esteem, but it should not be a distraction. So that's one of the reasons why we wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, and I mean, we've been wrestling with this as the Fabulous 413. Obviously, Western Mass is far from the Middle East, but so many people that we encounter day in and day out, be they Jew, be they Muslim, be they protesters, they are wrestling with these huge humanitarian issues. I drove by Congressman McGovern's office on Friday. There was a huge pro-Palestinian rally with dozens of people there. We talk to the congressman about it from a political perspective every week, but we haven't really wrestled with the human perspective. I talked to two of my friends who are Israeli Jews yesterday, and they're devastated not only because of how it felt when so many Jews were killed and kidnapped, but also because of what the Israeli government is now doing in Gaza. We are all, as human beings, wrestling with this. And you, who grew up Muslim in Pakistan, I'm sure, are wrestling with this in your own way.
Right, and 9/11 is brought up multiple times in terms of this is Israel's 9/11, and Biden also, when he went over there, he said, well, I mean, apart from some of the things that I don't agree with what Biden said, but one thing he did say was you should learn lessons from how US reacted to it, which was not the most productive way. And one of the things that I remember, I remember because I had to do it, was a registration.
As a Muslim?
As a Muslim. So this was a program called National Entry-Exit Registration System that was created after 9/11. Newly formed Homeland Security did that under President Bush. And it was designed for all males between 16 to 45, I think, and if they belong to certain countries, and they had 25 countries, out of which 24 were Muslim countries, which included Pakistan as well, that we had to go and register. And that registration included giving sort of like, your social security card, giving them photocopies of that, your credit cards, photocopies of that, your debit cards, and having an interview over there. And so
in Boston, you had to go to
so
Boston.
I had to go to Boston. They actually sent me a letter. A letter came out and they said, well, your appointment is at, I think it was 8 in the morning in Boston on a certain date. And they said that we expect you to be there unless you have a very good reason you cannot be there. I was a postdoc at Smith College at the time, Smith and UMass. And that's what I did. And so for me, I was not, I was like, I'm in academia. I'm a much more privileged situation, and I went there and the interview was fine, but as you can imagine, how intimidating it could have been. And this program, by the way, was stopped. About 100,000 people, I think, at least registered for that. A bunch of people got deported as well. A lot of people actually left the country because of this program as well. But this program discontinued in 2011. And if you remember, and maybe you don't remember, but in 2016, before Trump took over the presidency, President Obama asked to dismantle the records of that program, because what he worried about was the kind of rhetoric that at that time he was president-elect, Trump was using about the Muslim ban, which he did institute, right? And again, that was selective to certain countries, that he may end up using the list and information of people who got registered for this program. And so he asked to sort of dismantle the information. My concern is, first of all, I think that was a terrible thing. That was discriminatory. A lot of people don't even know about it because it didn't really impact US citizens, but impact others, who also live in the US, who also contribute in the US. And right now there is a similar talk going on. So the presidential candidate, Trump, and DeSantis and Tim Scott, they all have come out and have said that they would like to, if they come to power, they are going to cancel visas for students who are, for example, participating in these protests, right? And then there's a slippery language because they are supporting terrorists, right? But what constitutes protest? Because protesting is oftentimes, it's also right now about ceasefire. A lot of the protests are talking about humanitarian pause. And so they are threatening to do a similar thing that has happened before. And university administrations, college administrators, they are struggling with that. And they should. But they should struggle on the side of free speech. And here you have the statements. So, for example, DeSantis said, you don't have a right to be here on a visa. You don't have a right to be studying in the United States if you participate in these kind of protests. And it's also just a reminder that, as some people say, ignoring the indigenous population here, that America is built on immigrants. So is American science, And so a lot of people, and that includes me also. I'm here too. I also immigrated to be here. And to just use that as a way to pressure and censor, right? I can imagine. If I was a student right now on a student visa, I would be worried. I would be terrified. And if I go to a protest, well, all hats off to you, because that's a much bigger risk than equivalent other people are taking. But of course, you put that in context with the number of people dying, number of children dying in Gaza, that's what the perspective that you have to pick in. And I know that University of Massachusetts had protest, and it ended up
with arrests,
with over 50 students that got arrested. And that's just, I think, it should be unacceptable to the administration, but here we are.
There has been a chilling effect in academia as well in response to people's perspectives on the conflict between Israel and Hamas right now.
Yeah, and in fact, there is a prominent editor-in-chief of eLife journal. He just got fired. Michael Eisen is his name. He's Jewish. You have to add that thing, right? I mean,
Right.
you have to add, and this is again in terms of the context, the kind of language that you have to use. And he got fired because he shared an article from the satirical magazine, The Onion, which has been actually pretty pointed and pretty good. And so there was a story with the headline, "Dying Gazans Criticized for Not Using Last Words to Condemn Hamas." Now that's pretty biting, in some sense, you can imagine, it captures the sense. And so Michael Eisen tweeted this particular article, and he said, "The Onion speaks with more courage, insight, and moral clarity than the leaders of every academic institutions put together. I wish there were an Onion University," right? And he got actually pushback for that. He got and then he actually wrote back a day later. So this is important in that context. He actually said, "Every sane person on earth is horrified and traumatized by what Hamas did and wants it to never happen again. All the more so as a Jew with Israeli family. But I am also horrified by the collective punishment already being meted out on Gazans and the worst that is about to come. The Onion is not making light of the situation, and nor am I. These articles are using satire to make a deadly serious point about this horrific tragedy."
And Eisen ended up losing his job because of this?
Yes, he got fired. He was asked by the board to resign, and he refused. And he said that, "No, you'll have to fire me." And it's not just him, but a bunch of other editors have from this journal have resigned as well. And if you just look at this statement, that's not, at least, and I don't want to get fired either, but to me, this seems like a very reasonable statement. And I think this is the type of thing, and I should, again, connecting it to the larger politics. I did mention the GOP candidates, but now that I am a taxpayer as well, although I was a taxpayer even without U.S. citizen as well, but now I am a U.S. citizen, so the actions of our government we have to be responsible as well, because those tax dollars that go in, wherever they are being used, we are part of that. So in that context, it is the U.S. that vetoed the UN General Assembly resolution for a humanitarian pause. So again, sometimes, and for which overwhelmingly there was support for that in United Nations. Right? And so you go like, okay, so wait a minute. Can you repeat that? What did we veto? A resolution for a humanitarian pause for which the aid can go to Gaza. And the US vetoed that. And that is bizarre when we think in terms of that you have Gaza, which is one of the most densely packed places on earth. And half of the population is under 20 or so. And there is collateral going on, to which, by the way, President Biden recently said that, well, I have no confidence in the numbers that are coming from the Palestinians. By the way, he used the word, the Palestinians, the numbers that are coming in. And he said, collateral does happen. In fact, he says, I have no notion that the Palestinians are telling us the truth about how many people are killed. I'm sure innocents have been killed, and it's the price of waging a war. This is a statement by President Biden. Innocents have been killed. Yes, it's a price of waging a war. And as you can imagine, the same statement can be used for many different ways to justify the killing of innocent people many different ways. And so instead of pushing for a ceasefire, we have gone the opposite way. And this is one of those things. There are stories that are coming out that a lot of Muslims and Arab support for President Biden, which was crucial for especially states like Michigan, is slipping away. And I myself am wondering, actually I'm no longer wondering, and it had started to waver when the Biden administration also decided to send cluster munition, which is banned by most countries, to Ukraine and border wall and so on and so forth. But I think we are in a different state now.
Speaking with Hampshire College astronomer Dr. Salman Hameed, Mr. Universe, we usually talk about astronomy and films, and we have referenced that both astronomy and films can be an escape. And before we end this conversation, there is a beautiful artistic film that has to do with space and astronomy that people might want to watch during this time. Because when I feel confused and afraid and sad, I turn to the arts for healing. And you have a film recommendation, a short, wonderful, beautiful film.
Right. So again, normally I would have said, hey, watch 2001 Space Odyssey. But this day and age, and with TikTok generation, I think that would be hard to do.
It's a long film.
It's a long film. It's a beautiful film. And
yeah, one of my top films of all time.
There you go. But there is a 5-minute film. It's a short film, and we'll provide the link as well. It is called A Space Exodus. It's from 2008. It's by a Palestinian artist, Larissa Sansour. And she actually did a trilogy of films about Palestinian plight, various ways, and again, artistic way. But A Space Exodus is deeply inspired by 2001 Space Odyssey. In fact, the music is beautiful because the music has the same 2001 Space
also
Odyssey.
Zarathustra.
That's exactly right. And also the Blue Danube. But it has a little Arabic tinge to that. And so that's wonderfully done. But it has, it starts with sort of like this astronaut, which is played by Larissa Sansour herself, that she's over there in a spacesuit and she's getting close to the moon, and she says, Jerusalem, we have a problem. And then she actually gets to the moon and plants a flag, which is a Palestinian flag. And she says, this is one small step for a Palestinian, one giant leap for mankind.
The sunbird has landed. That's one small step for a Palestinian, one giant leap for mankind.
And the short film continues, and in some sense towards the end, it reminded me a little bit more like David Bowie, where you have this astronaut out in space going into oblivion. And that's what the movie is. But it's beautiful, it's appropriate, and this is not an escape, but I think this is a nice reflective piece of about what is going on. And I said reflective piece, and immediately I was like, oh, and it should be about the other type of peace as well. And I think all I would say towards the end is sort of like, that ceasefire, if nothing else, right now is essential. And we can always argue what happened. It depends upon where you start the clock. You start the clock on October 7th, things would be different. You start the clock a little bit back in the 1980s, the things would be different. You start the clock 67, 48, or whatever. But if you have thousands of children dying, I think we ought to, we may we all say, ceasefire should not be that controversial. Student visas should not be cancelled to protest against the killing of thousands